Welcome back to Nightly Nonsense, where we try to make some sense out of the nonsense all around us. You know, that naturally happens when you and I decide that we want to be Jesus. You know, Jesus makes sense out of the nonsense. Now, sometimes Jesus is going to help us see more clearly the picture, and we're going to see that things aren't the way that they seem to be. Sometimes Jesus is going to clear up the picture, and we're going to say, no, things are exactly like you think they are, right? But here's the truth. When we're trying to make some sense out of the nonsense around us, we need to understand that not everything we see is going to make sense to us. Right? There's a reason why you have five senses. You can't just depend on one of them, right? I can smell raspberry cookies, and I think they're raspberry cookies, right? I can feel raspberry and say, oh, it's sticky, it's gooey, right? You know, like, oh, this feels like this would be raspberry. I can, right? I can look at it and say, this is definitely a raspberry donut. Look at the reddish stuff that's coming out of the side of that donut, right? I can hear somebody tell me, I think it's raspberry, right? But it's probably not until I taste it that I'm going to tell whether it's raspberry. Now, here's the problem. To somebody who's never had raspberry before, how are they going to depend on their taste? You see, I love raspberry things, so I'm going to be able to tell you whether this is raspberry or not. Unless it doesn't have seeds in it, unless it's make-believe raspberry stuff, right? Then it's a little harder, right? But for the person who doesn't know, who's never had raspberry before, how are they going to know the difference between raspberry and strawberry? They look similar in nature when they're in a donut. Again, that's a bunch of nonsense. Here's the sense out of it, right? That the God of the universe is looking down and saying, I need you to be able to tell whether or not that's raspberry or not. Right? There are moments where our decisiveness is super important to the plan, the purpose of God. When he tells us, be here, do something, right? We want to be here. We want to do what God has told us in those moments. So we need to be able to distinguish what is it that exactly God told us to do, right? God wants us to be able to tell whether something is raspberry or not. Otherwise, he would have not made it distinguishable anyway. So, in your daily basis, can you decide, do you know the things that are from God or not? I was just having a conversation where the question came up, like, how do you know if fear is from the Lord or not? Especially when our Bible tells us that perfect love casts out fear, right? God doesn't want us to walk around in fear, yet it's something that he has given us, right? That is an impulse that can actually save us at times. It can actually get us to do right things at the time, right? Like, hey, that fear that you're sensing, this is a you and God thing. You need to take a moment and go, why am I having fear? Right? If fear is from the Lord, yet the Lord, love, Jesus casts out perfect Jesus casts out all fear. Like there's a problem with this whole thing. So, will God use fear? Yes. God will use fear, right? But is fear necessarily from God? No, probably God, if he wants you to have faith in him and be dependent upon him and love him and depend on him, then probably fear isn't from him, right? So here's my simple truth. A whole bunch of rambling. Here's the sense part, right? Are you able to distinguish what is from God, what isn't, right? Are you using your five senses? Are you using things other than just, somebody told me it was true, so it's got to be true? Are you using your other senses? Are your other capabilities? Are you depending on the giftings of God, right? I need to be able to hear from God. But you know what's also good? I have a group of friends, a group of people that I can have pray for me, right? They can say, yeah, that is a God thing or not a God thing, right? We want to be able to make sure things are from the God. So chew on that for a minute. We're going to come back. I'm going to make some sense out of the nonsense of this night tomorrow night. We'll see you again. Nightly Nonsense.